We only know that Nigel Farage was taking these huge amounts of money because the press investigated and found out and exposed this.
And I think it is glorious that the other parties aren't standing and he's going to spend the summer fighting a bin. I think it is absolutely glorious.
It seems to me that Nigel Farage has almost decided to try to take back some control of his predicament. Hello and welcome to Electoral Dysfunction with me, Beth Rigby.
Me, Ruth Davidson.
And me, Harriet Harman.
Hello there. We are recording this on Thursday morning and I've just landed back from Ankara in Turkey, where I've been at the NATO summit, and I walked into my house at 11:30 last night and it is hotter in London. My whole family were just wilted over various pieces of furniture. It's hotter in London than it is in Turkey. I need to go back to Turkey to cool down. That's bonkers, isn't it?
And is it a cliche to say that as the weather's hotting up, the politics is hotting up even more than you could possibly imagine it to be?
Harriet, look at that link there, eh? Well, let's talk about the politics, shall we? I hear that Starmer got a gift that was so illegal at the NATO summit that he didn't even take it on the plane. He didn't even try and get it back into Britain because it was just like, no.
He'd have got arrested.
So say what it is.
I'm not going to say. We're going to wait till the end. You got to listen to the whole episode.
Teaser.
He came down to the back of the plane to tell us. He was very amused by this. He was very amused. He was laughing away. But the Prime Minister is out of office. So it was a very surreal experience. And I did say to him, I did the pool clip. I did this sort of final broadcast pool clip. And I said to him, what did Trump say to you? And he said he wished me well and he said we'd keep in touch. I mean, I don't know if they will keep in touch. And then at the end I said to him, was this quite bittersweet for you? Because it must have been. And he just said no. I was like, okay. He said no. And then he just said it had been a real honour to serve his country and a real privilege. I sort of feel I've watched the whole rise and fall of his career. So it felt like, it was a closing of a chapter. It must have been rough for him. But I tell you what, fair play to the guy. He put on a really brave face. He executed his duties. He was good-humoured. And he was a pro, but I can't imagine how it must have felt internally. It must have been tougher.
Oh, completely. And just his family as well, because it's such a, we talk about big consuming jobs in politics, but being the Prime Minister, I mean, it literally leaves you no room for anything. It's not a grain of sand extra you can fit in your life. So to just have all of that happen and then for it to be taken away from you when you were just beginning to it must take a good year and a half to even get into the job just because it's just so overwhelming.
I think it's a great privilege, though. He's had a great privilege to lead the Labour Party and to be Prime Minister, albeit for a short time. And I don't think, when I listen to what you're saying, Ruth, about how difficult it must be for his family and moving house and everything, I just think to myself, well, nobody makes you stand for Parliament. Nobody makes you be Prime Minister. You choose it and you get the privilege, but you get the downside as well. So, he's master of his own destiny. Yeah.
I did not expect you to be the hardline, tough love approach out the three of us there, Harriet.
Cow this morning.
Yeah, that was not what I was expecting.
And also, the two men in his life that have taken up quite a lot of time in his premiership, or definitely a lot of his headspace. So Donald Trump was at NATO, that tricky leader to handle, and he was a little bit tricksy. But there was another leader that has been the thorn in the side of Keir Starmer on manoeuvres when he got to NATO, and that was, of course, Nigel Farage, because as the plane was in the air, we got a message on Nigel Farage's X account saying that he was going to make a statement about his future. So on the plane, everyone spends an hour going, what could it be? No one knew. Some of the journalists said, is he going to quit politics? And I thought, he's not going to quit politics. I've been up close to this guy for a while now. He doesn't look like he's about to throw in the towel. But he did announce as we got onto the buses to the hotel, so we were all in a convoy watching Nigel Farage live, and then end up at the top of the hotel on a balcony doing a live story. I hadn't even put my case in my room. But he announced he was going to resign as MP for Clacton and trigger a by-election, which he's framing as the people versus the establishment. And he did this because he said he has done nothing wrong. He says he's been unfairly treated over taking donations from very rich people before he became an MP. We've discussed the Christopher Harborne £5 million donation. So then he announces, in the midst of these two investigations, he's going to resign his seat and let the people judge him. What did you think of it?
Yeah, well, so I have to say, first of all, just to kind of catch up with where we are, because it all happened quite fast. So we had like a Sunday Times expose about this George Cottrell gifts in kind, which donations and gifts in kind also count, and their sort of monetary value would count. So it was staying at a big posh rented house quite a bit close to Parliament. It was security personnel. It was staffing, people that were going to like do nice videos of him for social media and fix all of that. So it was substantial value to this sort of stuff. And as you say, George Cottrell, convicted of wire fraud in the United States. No way Farage could say he didn't know about it because, as I understand it, he was huckled at the airport while he was there with Farage, and he spent some time in a penitentiary over there. But in terms of it then moving very fast, so we got from the Sunday announcement, you got all of these Reform MPs that were sent on the television to say nothing to see here. This is an establishment stitch-up. Everyone's piling on Farage and it's not very fair, boo-hoo-hoo. And I did think to myself more than once, did Robert Jenrick really think it was worth changing parties to just act as a human shield for Nigel Farage every time he goes on television? This is not like David Davis when he resigned and stood again in his own seat on a point of principle about sort of human rights. This is not when Zach Goldsmith resigned his seat and stood again because he'd gone from being a Conservative to an independent and he thought his constituents deserved the right to make a decision because, you know, they had voted for a party and he was no longer of that party, so it was a principle. This was a guy who basically has said, I don't like playing by the same rules as everybody else, therefore I'm going to quit. And I'm going to frame this. It's kind of like if he wins, he wins, and if he loses, he wins. Because if he loses the seat and he's not back in Parliament, then parliamentary investigations into whether he broke rules stop. If he wins the seat, no matter what then comes out in future, he gets to stand up and say, oh, well, we put it to the people of Clacton and they don't care, so stop asking me these hard questions. And we've seen how uncomfortable he is with these questions. And I think it is glorious that the other parties aren't standing and he's going to spend the summer fighting a bin. I think it is absolutely glorious.
Fighting a bin. I mean, Harriet, you are our resident expert on all things to do with standards. It seems to me, as Ruth was just saying, that Nigel Farage has almost decided to, as I said in my report, try to take back some control of his predicament in that he's jumping before he's potentially going to get pushed. Just explain the rules to us and why he might be doing that.
Well, the parliamentary rules, have been built up over the years in response to scandals where people have seen MPs take money and then vote in a particular way or ask questions of ministers in a particular way or make speeches, not because they think it's the right thing to do or because their constituents want them to do it, but because they've been bought by people giving them large amounts of money. So these rules have been built up which don't say you can't take the money, but they say that if you take money from people, you've got to register it so that your voters can know who is paying you. These rules are to protect people from the establishment in the form of hugely wealthy people buying MPs and corrupting our system. So it's to keep our politics clean and democratic so that it's the voters who have sway, not just people because they've got large amounts of money to give away. So what he's trying to do by calling this by-election is he's trying to set the people of Clacton and their decision to set that above the decision of the Standards Committee, which is the committee which will decide whether or not he's complied with the rules or breached the rules. And actually, the people of Clacton have got an absolute right to decide who their MP is. But the people of Clacton do not have the right, and they're not going to be getting the evidence or doing the deliberation about whether or not he's breached the parliamentary rules.
I'm going to cut in here, Harriet, just to ask you just to put the stage in the middle, because part of Farage's saying is that other politicians from other parties are ganging up on him. And while the committee's made up of parliamentarians from all parties, there is a stage before that. There's an independent standards commissioner who gathers the evidence and gives it to the committee, isn't it? So it's not as if it's just the committee doing stuff to be mean to Farage. They've got a duty to kind of uphold what the independent guy recommends to them and then look at the sanction. Or have I got that wrong? Because I didn't serve in the Commons, but you did, and you chaired that committee, so you know much more about this than me, but that was my understanding.
Well, that's absolutely right. There's the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner, which is Daniel Greenberg, who is very experienced indeed and extremely independent and has never had any sort of political activity. So he is the one that will carry out the investigation. And then he will report to the Standards Committee. The Standards Committee is made up of 7 members of Parliament, but it's also got 7 independent members on it who are picked because they're people who've been involved in regulation and they're completely independent from politics. So, you know, the system is as good as it can be made to be, and it's got a very important purpose, which is to make MPs be open and honest about the money they're receiving. So then Farage tries to put the people of Clacton, set them up against the Standards Committee by announcing he's going to resign and cause a by-election. And immediately that poses a challenge for all the other parties. What should they do about that? Firstly, should the government, who's got the power in this respect, refuse to let him do it? Because he's taking the mick. I mean, this is not, you know, a sort of proper process, as Ruth said. It's a stunt. So should the government, because they've got the power to not let him take this resignation route, should they stop him? And they obviously decided that although it was totally wrong for him to do it, and it is a stunt, that it would just play into his hands to stop him do it. So they've decided to let him resign and cause a by-election. Then they have to decide, are we going to stand candidates in this by-election? Are we going to treat it as a proper parliamentary competition and stand candidates? And one by one, the parties, Labour, Tories, Lib Dem, Greens, all decided that they wouldn't stand a candidate because it wasn't really a proper process, except for Count Binface, who was standing next to Andy Burnham in the Makerfield by-election. Do you remember? I did think...
I hope the Fox is going to stand as well.
But, you know, I did think it was quite odd because, you know, when there was the Makerfield by-election and literally the eyes of the world on it, and I thought, are Andy Burnham's people going to make sure he stands between a Liberal and a Conservative? Surely they're not going to let him stand next to Count Binface.
It's alphabetical.
When the whole of... But they could have arranged with the return. No, they could have. They could have arranged
Count Binface,
Burnham and
Andy
Binface.
Burnham.
But they could have arranged.
Fox.
Anyway, they didn't. So the first person whose hand was shaken by Andy Burnham after he won that amazing Makerfield by-election was Count Binface. Anyway, it looks
Binface,
like, although Labour...
comma Count, and then Burnham, comma Andy, because they probably would have been next to each other on the ballot.
Honestly, it's alphabetical. I love it. I should say, the reason I keep saying Fox, and you might be, is Andy Burnham was between a fox, a candidate dressed up as a fox.
I do wonder what people in other parts of the world make of this.
Someone said to me, it's a brave man that gets between a fox and a bin.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's rather descended into farce because none of the other parties are standing candidates, but Count Binface. And his manifesto, he's been asked, what is your manifesto? And his manifesto is this: I am not Nigel Farage. But if he gets re-elected in this Clacton by-election, which is likely to be in August, and who on earth wants a by-election in August anyway, especially an unnecessary by-election, then what will happen is the Commissioner will continue with the investigation that's already underway and that will be suspended during the period of the by-election. And then there's every chance that there will be another by-election next year in Clacton if the Standards Committee recommend And if the Standards Commissioner says he's breached the rules, and if the Standards Committee recommend a penalty of suspension from Parliament of over 10 days, then there's an opportunity for the Clacton residents to do a recall petition, which triggers another by-election. And I think that is what is likely to happen. And in that case, the parties will have to stand candidates, because that'll be a proper by-election.
Keep up at the back, everyone. Are you following?
I don't give Rachel Reeves much credit of writing a dry line of humour, but she put out a tweet saying, because it's the Chancellor that says whether somebody can resign the House of Commons or not, they have to apply to resign, said that she absolutely would let him resign. She'd let him resign immediately, because if he wants to spend the summer shouting at a bin, who was she to stop him? I did think it was quite funny, I have to say.
What Nigel Farage did was he doesn't hold a news conference in which he makes an announcement and takes questions. He live streams this from Reform HQ, and then we as broadcasters have to take a decision on whether to run that or not, because it's normally we send our own cameras to things. We have broadcast pools, so the broadcasters send cameras, so it helps us make sure it's independent. And normally you would expect some scrutiny, but in this case, I think we decided it was of significance enough to run it live. But it was fascinating in the few sort of hours afterwards, because what happened was probably what he didn't expect to happen, which was everyone called his bluff. So first, all the parties came out and said it was a gimmick and a stunt. And then they began to come out and said, you know what, actually, it was Rupert Lowe of Restore who did it first. He said,
and was really good about the way he framed it, to be honest with you. He was properly good politics there.
Yeah, he said, we will fight Nigel Farage in a by-election, but we will fight him in the second by-election, the by-election we think he will have to face over breaking parliamentary rules. And then everyone came in. And actually, interestingly, Nigel Farage has done one interview around this with the Mail, and it's come out today. And he was asked about whether he'd been wrong-footed. Did he think he'd be the only proper candidate? Sorry, Count Binface. Did he think he'd be the only candidate? And he said, of course not. And then now he's framing it as, this is to quote Nigel Farage, I'm asking for an endorsement of me as a person and our agenda for change. But Binface, his odds have gone from 50 to 1 to 5 to 1 overnight on the booking odds. When I asked some of my Reform sources about whether they'd had a bit of regret about this gamble that they've taken, they insist that they feel confident that they are in the right place. And then they said that Labour and Tories are admitting by not standing they can't beat Nigel Farage.
I don't think in any way that he gamed this out. The premise was, if you don't re-elect me in Clacton, this whole sort of overturning the tables in the Temple, this is upending of the current order, which is failing Britain, according to him, is all going to go away, and it's going to go back to cosy consensus, two-party politics, and we'll have missed this golden moment. And then nobody stood, and he's now going to be shouting at a bin. And this man who has, I looked it up, he has over 20 years experience as an elected MEP. He's been in frontline politics for 33 years from when he founded his first political party. He spent 11 years as the leader of UKIP in a couple of sessions, 2 years as the leader of the Brexit Party, 5 and a bit years as the leader of Reform UK, again in 2 different stints. So he spent over 15 years as a party leader, over 33 years in frontline politics, and over 20 years as an elected politician. And he's saying he's not the establishment guy. But if you run him against a bin, suddenly you can't do that. And we can hear from Count Binface as to why he's standing and what he's going to be running on. Let's hear it.
Greetings, electoral dysfunction. Count Binface here, intergalactic space warrior. And I'm speaking to you from my starship, the Alberetta, which is now parked nicely in orbit just on the far side of your moon. Nice to know there aren't any Artemis crafts getting in the way right now. So here I am. And you want to know why I'm standing in Clacton? Well, I tell you what, your podcast says it all. Electoral dysfunction. This is it in a nutshell. You've got a sitting MP, or he was, calling a by-election when he didn't need to, at the cost of 348 grand to the British taxpayer when he might have to fight another one all over again. I call that insane, more insane than him having to face a recyclone alien at the ballot box. So, I think it's just about the sweet spot for a Binface campaign, which is saying something because I just done Makerfield against Andy Burnham. I was hoping to put my space boots up, but hey, no rest for the wicked. So I'm back. I'm interested. And, if the good people of Clacton decide that they would like me to stand, well, who knows? Maybe we'll have mano a bino. We shall see. I look forward to seeing you guys on the hustings. Keep up the great work. Lots of love. Binny.
Oh, there you have it, Count Binface. And I should say on the cost of it all, the Independent newspaper put the figure at 275,000 based on the confirmed spend on the 2014 Clacton by-election plus 12 years of inflation. And Nigel Farage says Reform told the local council in Clacton that it would cover the cost of this by-election, but that's simply not allowed under electoral law. I don't even need to tell you why. Parties cannot pay for by-election.
And trying to
they
win.
They have to be independent. So obviously, so the taxpayer is going to have to foot the bill for this. But look, let's just take a thought experiment and try and look at it from, because you've both spoken clearly about how it could backfire, that the parliamentary standards investigation carries on. I mean, one thing, Ruth, though, is that what it does do is it does give the microphone back to Nigel Farage. We've been talking a lot, haven't we, about how he is a media performer. He wants to do press conferences. He likes to be on the stage. Last summer, Reform had a whole summer of campaigning, which obviously the Tories, we talked about this, Ruth, were in despair because they were like, why is it that the Conservatives are allowing Reform to do all the running? And I think Labour politicians were annoyed with the government about that too.
Well, I think that's going to be different this summer for two reasons. One is because Ofcom rules will kick in when the writ's moved, which means that you've got to give a same amount of time on air to all of the main candidates in an election. So Farage will actually be limited on how much he's able to do. I think also, I think the Tories have upped their game in terms of how they've learned to be in opposition. I think the question that you asked Harriet about, could it work, this idea that he's being set upon, that he's having more scrutiny than everybody else, that he's being attacked, that everyone's ganging up on him, because he's always set himself apart as an outsider in politics. And that outsider role in lots of countries around the world has a lot of potency right now.
We only know that Nigel Farage was taking these huge amounts of money because the press investigated and found out and exposed this. And Nigel Farage clearly doesn't like accountability. But if you put yourself in the public domain, which he's done by being the leader of a party, if you get ahead in the polls and you're putting yourself forward as Prime Minister, you can expect, and the country should expect, that there is proper scrutiny of you and you are accountable for what you're doing. So most of what he's doing is he's just complaining because he doesn't want the scrutiny that rightly should come if you are in a senior position in public life and trying to be Prime Minister.
Well, look, we've got to go. That's all from us today. We will be back on Tuesday for our subscribers only episode. And if you'd like to get access to that, then the details are in the show notes. You get exclusive access to Tuesday episodes as part of that package, and you get answers to some of the questions you put in our forum.
So do get in touch. Burner phone is still always in action. That's 07934 200 444.
Or email us at electoraldysfunction@sky.uk. But goodbye for now.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.